On Sunday morning, Nick arrived to help his parents with their household chores. The previous night, he had delivered a large quantity of high-quality birch firewood to them. Today, he came up to the house to chop it up for them. The pile of firewood was growing quickly, and eventually Nick decided that he had done enough for the day. He had promised his daughter Sophia that he would take her and her mother to the mall to do some shopping and have ice cream. He didn't want to disappoint her by being late. Nick had been working hard recently to save up some money for a new apartment for his family. He didn't have much time, but nevertheless, he always remembered to help his parents since they were the ones who gave him guidance to become the man he had become. Nick's parents were getting old. A few years ago, they had decided to move away from the busy city to the countryside. They had been saving up money and recently finally purchased a cozy house. They were generous and had given their old apartment to Nick and his family, who had previously lived in small rented apartments. However, the apartment only had 2 bedrooms, and Nick had always dreamed of having a larger family. Therefore, he was working on expanding his housing to accommodate his future plans. After setting aside the final piece of firewood, Nick hurried inside the house. He quickly gobbled up the apple pie that his mother had carefully prepared and washed them down with a cup of coffee. He then began to pack up for his trip back to the city. As he drove out of the gate, he looked at his parents with affection. They stood embracing and appeared to be happy, but there was a hint of longing in their eyes. Nick felt a twinge of sadness as he remembered the past events that still caused pain for his parents, even though so much time had passed since then. A minute later, the small house with smoke pouring out of its chimney disappeared from Nick's rearview mirror. A wonderful smell of pine filled the air. Nick, thinking of his wife and daughter, instantly brightened up. He carefully followed the winding tire tracks until he made his way to the highway, where he increased the speed of his powerful and expensive SUV. He knew that he would likely have to sell the SUV and get a smaller and much simpler sedan if he wanted to provide his family with good housing. The car was not new, but he had earned it by working in the north, and it was a source of pride for him, especially since he had bought it with his hard-earned money. Although it was unfortunate to part with it, his current priority was providing a home for his family. Nick was filled with a sense of excitement and anticipation. The winter scenery outside was breathtaking, with a blanket of snow covering everything inside. The once barren trees now looked like they were dipped in powdered sugar. The sun was shining down from a clear blue sky, creating a glittering effect on the snow-covered fields that passed by his window. Nick took in the beautiful winter landscape and felt grateful for this moment. However, he soon had to abruptly step on the brakes, causing the car to almost crash into a pole. He was unsure whether to be angry at the sudden obstacle that appeared on the road or not. In the middle of the road stood a little girl, no more than 4 years old, her face wrapped in a poorly tied shawl. He couldn't be angry at the little girl, but he felt frustrated with her negligent parents, who were probably nearby. He felt that they deserved a lesson in how to take care of their child. Nick got out of his car and approached her. "Hey, little one, what are you doing here all alone?" Nick asked, trying not to scare the girl, but she suddenly turned to him and answered in her small, childlike voice, "Mister, please save my mom. She's over there in the snow." The girl pointed somewhere off to the side. Nick's expression changed, seeing how the little girl's hands were shaking from the cold. "Oh, little baby, you're freezing," he sighed and said, "Hey, I'm not going to hurt you, alright? Come here, baby." He took off his coat and wrapped the poor girl with it, making sure her hands were inside the warm sleeves of the coat. Then he picked her up in his arms and followed her small footprints into the woods. With every step he took, his heart ached for the little girl, who now seemed to be falling asleep in his arms. He couldn't help but think of all the dangers she might have faced and how she must have felt all alone in the cold and dark woods. But now she was safe and protected, and he was determined to make sure she would never have to face such hardships again. As he walked, he looked down at her peaceful face and felt a deep sense of love and compassion for her, because he was a father to his own daughter. He knew that he would do everything in his power to ensure that she had a bright and happy future. He realized that she was not just any little girl, but an angel sent from above to teach him the true meaning of love and compassion. Tears continued to roll down his cheeks as he made his way to the girl's mother. When Nick finally spotted the girl's mother in the distance, he was confused as to how she might have ended up there. The neighborhood was known for its drunkards and addicts, so he wondered if this was another case of a mother who had overdosed. He was afraid that she might have already frozen to death. He had seen how addiction can tear families apart, and he wondered where the father was, or if he even existed. What he hated most about the situation was that children always suffered the most, often ending up in the foster care system. As he thought about the injustice in this world, Nick trudged through deep snow with the girl in his arms. Soon they reached the girl's mother, who was lying in a snowdrift and moaning softly, barely breathing. Nick immediately rushed to her. He told the little girl that she was really strong. He offered to play a game with her. Nick knew that she might fall asleep and he wouldn't be able to pick them up both. "Let's play a train, okay? I will be pulling and you grab onto my sweater." He picked up the mother in his arms and began to make his way back to his car. The little girl followed him. "Now Mom will be alright. This mister must be Santa Claus. Mom said Santa Claus can give me anything I ask. He gave me a gift. He's saving my mom," the little girl thought to herself. Ellie had never seen Santa before, but she was convinced that he existed. After all, when she had asked for help to save her mother, Santa heard her wishes and fulfilled her request. 5 years before these events, the atmosphere was gloomy in a cramped one-room apartment on the outskirts of a big city. Mr. and Mrs. Clark watched their daughter pack her things silently and with tears in their eyes. Bella was leaving her parents' house for good, a decision that was difficult for her, but she felt that she had no other choice. The issue was that a few months ago, Bella had fallen in love as deeply as she never had before. But her parents did not approve of her choice of a man. It was not surprising why they did not approve of him. He was a rough criminal who had spent a significant portion of his life behind bars. Bella, however, saw nothing wrong with the fact that he had served time. Her Joseph had long ago atoned for his guilt, and there were no other sins on him. His friends had framed him, while they themselves had come out unscathed, and Joseph had been left to take the blame for everyone. "Sweetie, are you sure?" Mrs. Clark asked her daughter, almost in tears. "You know, our house is always open for you, but not for that robber." "Mom, I told you 100 times, Joseph is not a robber. He was not even there at all. And the investigation fabricated the case in order to protect someone of their own," Bella replied. "This bastard bewitched you. How can you not see the obvious things?" Mr. Clark joined the conversation, looking menacingly at his daughter. He hoped that this would prevent her from making a rash decision. But at that moment, Bella, who was usually quiet and calm, became angry. "He is not a bastard, Dad, and don't you dare say such things about my future husband. By the way, he invited me to live with him in his grandma's house, and you thought we were going to live at the bus station or something. In fact, Joseph is actively looking for a job. He hasn't succeeded yet because no one wants to get involved with his past. If you don't let me live the way I want, then I have to leave home forever. I love you all very much, but let me do it my way. This is my life," Bella exclaimed. "So you're saying we, your parents, have nothing to do with your life? The bird has grown up and flown out of the nest? Is that how you think?" When the parents received the silent stare from Bella, Mr. Clark couldn't hold it anymore. "Go right ahead. And don't let your foot be here anymore," he shouted, pointing to the door. "Charlie, please calm down." Mrs. Clark tried to stop her husband, but it was too late. Bella grabbed her suitcase and stormed out of the house. After that, she never returned to her home again. There was a man waiting for her at the entrance, who, unlike her parents, praised her for her decision. He grabbed her by the arm, forgetting that she was dragging a heavy suitcase. He led her towards the station. Their bus was leaving very soon. Meanwhile, Mrs. Clark was sobbing on her husband's shoulders in the cramped kitchen. "Where did this criminal come from in our daughter's life? I really hoped that everything would work out with Paul. He's a good guy with a stable job. He loves us so much. I did my best to make it work with him. I even invited him to our house as if to fix the computer. I thought that they would get drawn to each other. After all, they have known each other since childhood. Paul actually confessed to me that he loves our Bella, but I guess she was cold to him and doesn't see him as anything more than a friend. But Paul told me he did manage to invite her to a restaurant, but that criminal got in their way, turning our girl's head. Mrs. Clark was still crying, feeling sad and disappointed. Don't worry. She will return soon and realize that she made a mistake with her choice. She'll be back, you'll see, Mr. Clark consoled his wife. In the meantime, while her parents were sobbing, Bella was sitting on the seat of the old bus, worn to holes and heading to her new life. As her boyfriend dozed off for a bit from the long road, she glanced at him tenderly. She remembered how they had met. She had been working as a nurse in a hospital. One day, a very modest and polite patient came to them with a knife wound in his hand. Joseph had received the wound after he went to talk to his former friend, who was the reason why he ended up in prison. That guy, instead of begging for forgiveness, took out a knife. Joseph spoke honestly about his whole life, including the fact that he was raised by his grandma. She is now old and lives in the cabin in the woods. She rarely gets out of bed. Joseph told Bella that he never left her and takes care of her. Bella was heartened by the love and devotion that the grandson showed towards his grandmother. In a world where many people prioritize themselves, it was inspiring to see someone who placed their loved ones above all else. Taking care of an elderly relative can be a difficult and demanding task, but the grandson seemed to carry it with ease and joy. His actions spoke volumes about his character and the love that he held in his heart. It was a reminder that there is still so much good in the world and that love and family are the things that truly matter. Bella believed Joseph, but still treated his courtship with some caution. Joseph honestly stated that he liked her. While he was in the hospital, he elegantly courted her, read poetry, and wrote love notes, which he secretly left in her office along with a bouquet of wildflowers, sneaking them in when no one was there. But still, something about the man made her uneasy, so she took her time. However, one incident soon made her forever believe in the sincerity of Joseph's feelings. It happened a week after he left the hospital. Late in the evening, she was returning home from her shift when she heard a hoarse, cold voice behind her. Well, 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 where is such a beauty hurrying alone in the night? Don't you need a strong shoulder to protect you? The man, who clearly had bad intentions, was breathing in her face with the smell of alcohol. Bella tried to run away, but the guy grabbed her tightly and dragged her into the nearest woods. She didn't even have time to scream for help when Joseph suddenly appeared in front of them with a bouquet of roses. He beat the guy so well that he flew over the nearby fence and ran away. At that moment, Bella realized that Joseph's feelings for her were sincere. She knew that she would be protected behind him. It didn't matter that he had been in jail. What mattered was that he was here to protect her now. Joseph was very glad that everything turned out this way, but not because he was finally able to win over the beautiful nurse. In fact, her beauty was not the main thing for him. He needed someone to take care of a sick grandmother. And Bella was a perfect fit for that since she was a nurse. Joseph still had sentimental feelings for his grandmother. One day, he invited Bella to the old woman's house where he lived too. After a couple more visits, he offered Bella to move in there for a while. Joseph was unemployed. He wasn't even thinking about finding a job. He considered himself a respected member of the criminal world. Soon, he didn't see a need for a job when the house was always clean and comfortable, and delicious food was always cooked. After some time, Bella had to quit her job at the hospital. It was too far away, but in the rural town where she was now living, there was a small clinic and she started working there. 2 months later, Bella got pregnant. Of course, as a noble gentleman, Joseph offered his hand and heart to his beloved. However, they didn't have a wedding ceremony. As the groom preferred to celebrate modestly without any ceremonies, they just got registered. Joseph argued that that's all it takes for a happy family. But it was only after that a completely different life began for Bella. She would regret not listening to her parents multiple times. But it was too late. She was carrying Joseph's child in her belly, and when she gave birth, she was consumed with all the chores. But the biggest reason Bella couldn't move out was that Joseph had threatened to hurt her and her whole family if she ever thought of leaving him. 5 years had passed and Joseph woke up in a rundown and cold house with a headache from the night before. He glared at his wife as she cooked lunch. Bella didn't have to work that day as it was her day off. Her daughter Ellie played outside while she did chores. It may have appeared to be a perfect family, but in reality, Bella was a prisoner in her own home. Her husband's abuse and neglect left her constantly in a state of sadness and fear. Joseph sat at the table eating alone, as if his wife was not good enough to join him. He stood up, walked to the table, and asked for her salary. "Did you get your paycheck?" Bella nodded with tears in her eyes. She knew that her husband would take all of it and spend it on alcohol and fun with friends. She would have to borrow money again to buy food and work extra hours to pay off his debts. "Give it to me," Joseph demanded harshly. After counting the bills with a pleased expression, he stuffed them in his pocket. As he ate, a sinister look crossed his face as he pondered new ways to inflict pain on his wife. "You made this terrible food again? I can't even eat it. Your cooking killed my grandmother. You poisoned her, you witch. You thought you were going to take the house, huh? I knew you married me for all the good stuff I got." Joseph yelled at his wife, who was sitting on the floor curled up into a ball. It was extremely unfair for Joseph to say those things. In the last 3 years, Bella had taken care of his grandma while he didn't lift a finger to help. Joseph's grandma had actually wanted to leave the house to Bella, but Joseph had threatened her and convinced her otherwise. His words were not empty, as he often physically abused Bella. Bella would have left him long ago, but she was scared for her daughter. Joseph threatened to take her daughter away through the courts, and if that didn't work, he would hurt them both. Bella didn't dare to turn to her parents for help, as she had left their home in the past not listening to their warnings. She probably would have continued to suffer if she hadn't suddenly collapsed in pain while clutching her stomach. Joseph was yelling at her for not cleaning up the spilled soup. Ellie heard her mother's cries and tried to intervene, but she also received a kick from her hungover father. Bella suffered in pain all day as Joseph took away her phone and wouldn't let her call for an ambulance. Only in the evening, when he was invited to a party with friends, did he finally leave her alone. As soon as Joseph left, Bella thought this was her last chance. She didn't care about what would happen. She packed up her most important things and together with Ellie, they headed out of the cabin. It turned out that pain in her stomach was her appendix that had burst. This disease is not dangerous if treated in time, but for Bella, it was already a matter of life and death. As they were making their way through thick snow, Bella couldn't walk anymore and collapsed unconscious in the snow. Fortunately, her daughter was a mature child for her age and went to get help alone. Nick recognized his sister, but he never thought that they would meet again under such circumstances. Nick used to hold a grudge against Bella for the way she had hurt their parents for many years. But seeing her and the little Ellie in such a pitiful state, his anger instantly turned to compassion. He rushed her to the hospital in time, just before it was too late. The ex-convict was livid when he found out that his wife was in the hospital instead of waiting on him. He rushed to the hospital to confront Bella. Joseph was contemplating how he would drag her out and bring her back home. But he didn't know yet that Nick, Bella's brother, was there too. Bella was feeling better after an operation. Nick was sitting beside her bed holding her hand and talking to her. She couldn't talk, but she could listen. Ellie was also sitting at the desk and drawing. Nick was so happy to meet his niece for the first time. Ellie was beaming with happiness. Of course, she was still a little shy to talk much to her newfound uncle. Suddenly, the door flung open and in walked Joseph, furious and breathing heavily. By this time, Nick had learned all about their story, and he was actually glad Joseph came in. He quietly got up and led Joseph outside, pretending to be a doctor. As they got out of the front doors, Nick did what any brother would do. After that, Joseph never dared to show up in their lives again. He eventually disappeared without a woman by his side. If only Bella had reached out to her family for help earlier, she and her daughter wouldn't have had to endure so much suffering. Her family forgave her. After all, she was their daughter and sister. Paul, who was now a successful software engineer, still had an open heart. He was a quiet guy, Bella was his first love, and all these years, he had waited for her to come back. Paul, as soft and nice as he was, asked Bella out to the same restaurant where they had their first date. This time around, it worked out fine for both of them. It seemed like he felt that his life still had potential and happiness was yet to come. Bella and her daughter Ellie were yet to experience the love of a caring husband.